In this 3-episode series, we discover which local musician had the biggest impact in Cape Girardeau. And then,
that is where Elvis Presley performed back in the 1950s.
Before Elvis Presley and Metallica performed in sold-out arenas across the world, they played in this one, the Arena Building.
Really, my favorite way that I've found to battle evil and people who have sadness and depression is to make music and play music.
And we sit down with Real Rock's Kirby Ray to hear what few listeners have ever heard. I'm Morgan Johnson, and this is Before and After. Shivelbines music has launched more local musicians than most people realize. For generations, musicians from all over the region have walked through those doors looking for their first guitar or their next chance to play. For many of them, it all started right there. The story of Shivelbine music traces back to Cape Girardeau's jazz scene in the early 1900s, where musician Peg Meyer was making waves. A multi-talented performer, Meyer was a significant figure in the jazz world and Cape Girardeau's cultural life. Known primarily for his saxophone skills, Meyer was deeply embedded in the local music community and co-founded the Melody Kings, one of the earliest jazz bands in southeast Missouri. The Melody Kings performed at dances, gatherings, and live events across the Midwest, popularizing jazz and helping to cement it as a significant cultural movement. In search of another source of income, in 1934, Meyer opens a branch of the St. Louis Band Instrument Company, which distributed instruments to local schools. It was at the time when Cape Central's band director was a man named William Shivelbine. The two would establish a close working relationship that would lead to a partnership the following decade when they opened the M&S Music Store. But 2 years later, in 1949, Peg Meyer wanted out of the business and would sell his shares to William Shivelbine.
So he sold out his remaining shares to my grandfather, who unfortunately, shortly after that, passed away himself and left the business to my dad, Leland, or Freck as everybody knows him here, and his older brother, Bill. And so in 1949 it became Shivelbines Music.
But the building you see wasn't the original location for Shivelbines. Before moving to 535 Broadway, the music store was located at what is now the Hypnotic Bar on Broadway. Business operations would take place here for 2 decades before moving to their current location in 1969. Prior to Shivelbines, this building had gone through a series of identities, including a furniture store, a hotel, and was even rumored to have been a bar. And what you see now is not what it looked like in the late 60s and early 70s, including some of the items sold.
Originally, where we are now, this used to be our TV and home stereo display area. We sold Magnavox products for many, many years. My brother Scott was kind of the guy that ran all that sort of stuff. Big box stores kind of ran us out of that business a long time ago. But that's what we had on this side. The rest of the things that products and services that we offer have pretty much been the same. That's been about the only thing that's gone away over the years.
As jazz, blues, and rock music surged in popularity, Shivelbine Music expanded its inventory to cater to all types of musicians. From beginners to seasoned players, the store became the go-to place for anyone interested in picking up a new instrument or refining their music skills. Over time, it became more than a store. It became a space where musicians could meet, share, and celebrate their love of music. These walls have seen countless faces, including George Porter Jr., George Jones, and even Ozzy Osbourne's lead guitarist, Zakk Wylde. But above all, Shivelbines has always stuck with the primary mission: school music service.
The main part of our business has been built on originally was school music service, and it still is. So we have people that go out and call on all the area schools, providing instruments and repair services and accessories to their schools, probably covering about a 100-mile radius, so to speak, where we go out. And You don't see that when you walk in because it's all outside of the building. But we've been blessed to have employees that care about the store and care about music and want to put that message out there to the public. And it's been fun. It really has been.
The store is now run by the third generation of Shivelbines, Mike and Bill. Through its commitment to service, community, and the enduring joy of music, Shivelbine music has cemented its legacy as a vital part of Cape Girardeau's cultural fabric. So in conclusion, in 1921, Peg Meyer begins his music career and making an impact in Cape Girardeau. Fast forward to 1934, Meyer opens a branch of the St. Louis Band Instrument Company and kickstarts several school band programs in southeast Missouri and southern Illinois by seeking out music teachers and training them how to teach band. Come 1947, Meyer and William Shivelbine buy the store and name it M&S Music. 2 years later, Meyer sells his shares to William Shivelbine. He would continue to work there as a repairman all the way until the 80s. 2 decades later, Shivelbine's music moves from their old location, the Hypnotic Bar building, to its current location we all know today. And in 2024, Shivelbine's celebrated 75 years in business. From the early days of Peg Meyer's and 632 Broadway to its continued mission to serve schools all over the region, this has been before and after Shivelbine's music. Before the world knew their names, before the sold-out stadiums, before the titles, the records, and the legacy, they came here, to a building in Cape Girardeau, where legends hadn't become legends yet. This is before and after Elvis and Metallica at the Arena building. When we witness historical moments, we're not always aware of their significance. Sometimes the circumstances aren't noteworthy until someone becomes a world icon. Here inside the Arena building, that's exactly what happened. Let's rewind. In 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt created an agency, the Work Projects Administration. It employed and pushed millions of Americans to build infrastructure to support arts during the Great Depression. That's what led to the construction of the Arena building, which began in 1937 and was completed 2 years later. It is an Art Deco multi-purpose building used for community gatherings, including concerts for up-and-coming musicians. On July 20th, 1955, the Arena building held a concert to benefit cerebral palsy. The lineup of musicians included regional acts such as Bud Deckelman, Wanda Jackson, and Elvis Presley.
And then the stage to my left over here, that is the original stage at the Arena. That is where Elvis Presley performed back in the 1950s.
He was 20 years old and recognized from the Louisiana Hayride, a live radio show that also kickstarted the careers of Hank Williams and Johnny Cash. The following year is when Elvis's name would hit the stratosphere, after signing with RCA Records and releasing hits like Heartbreak Hotel. Over the years, he would continue performing, starring in movies, TV specials, and collecting award-winning hardware. Elvis Presley would pass away in 1977, but his legacy only grew in death. Still to this day, his property is a tourist destination for travelers from all over the globe. He is easily one of the most famous performers of all time, and a small part of his journey took place right here in Cape. When Elvis performed at the Arena building, he wasn't yet the king, but to the people in that building that night, something felt different. The sound was new, the energy was undeniable, and whether they realized it or not, they weren't just watching a performance, they were witnessing the beginning of something much bigger. Because before the world fully caught on, Elvis Presley played here. And years later, it happened again. A different sound, a different generation, but the same kind of moment.
So with the Arena, when I was a kid, rock concerts would come to the Arena. Many hard rock shows, like I said before, about Metallica and Armored Saint and King Cobra and Autograph playing at the Arena. You know, there's been so many great bands like that.
When Metallica came through Cape Girardeau, they weren't yet the global force they would become. By the mid-1980s, a heavier sound was making its way across America. When Metallica arrived in Cape Girardeau during their Damage Inc. tour, they weren't coming as global icons. Not yet. The Master of Puppets album had just been released, which had caught the attention of fans beyond the underground scene. But inside the arena building on May 24th, 1986, no one knew just how close this band was to reaching megastardom, because this tour wasn't just another run of shows. It was a turning point. A moment when a rising band proved they could command a stage and begin the climb towards global recognition. It wasn't long after that when everything would change. In 1991, Metallica released the Black Album, which debuted at #1 in several countries, sold over 16 million copies in the United States alone, and made them a household name. Throughout the years, Metallica's catalog would continue to grow and their name continued to spread. Today, they are one of the most iconic bands of all time and widely regarded as the greatest metal band ever. They have a long list of accolades, including 9 Grammy Awards and an induction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009. But before all of that, before the big arenas, they played in this one. 2 different nights, 2 different decades, and yet the same stage. In the 1950s, a young Elvis Presley stepped into the spotlight, bringing with him a sound and style that would change music and culture forever. Decades later, Metallica would do something similar. Louder, heavier, but just as disruptive. Elvis brought movement, Metallica brought force. Elvis shocked a generation with rhythm and style. Metallica pushed boundaries with volume and intensity. But in both moments, something happened. Not yet realized, just the beginning. And inside the arena building, the people of Cape Girardeau were there for it, all before the world knew what was about to happen. So in conclusion, in 1935, FDR creates the Works Progress Administration, which employed millions of Americans to build infrastructure for the arts. 2 years later, the construction of the arena building begins. And 2 more years later, the construction of the arena building is complete. In 1955, Elvis performs in Cape Girardeau at the venue. In 1977, in the midst of an incredibly successful career, Elvis Presley passed away. The following decade is when the up-and-coming metal band Metallica would perform in the arena building. 4 months later, Cliff Burton would unfortunately pass away in a bus crash. 5 years later, Metallica's Black Album would release, which is around the time they become a household name. And in 2009, Metallica was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. From regional and underground fame to becoming world icons, this has been before and after Elvis and Metallica at the arena building. For nearly 30 years, one voice has echoed through car speakers, garages, and late-night drives across the heartland. But behind that voice is a story few listeners have ever heard. Join me today as I sit down with Kirby Ray from Real Rock 99.3. I'm Morgan Johnson. This is Before and After.
Otto Dingledine was a blacksmith who started the Arts Council here. It's one of the oldest arts councils in the state. And I got the award in 2023, so that was just floored.
If you've ever lived in Cape, then you probably know this voice.
Real Rock 99.3, it's Kirby Ray, and it is day 2 of our St. Jude Radiothon with our sister stations K103 and Mike FM.
Kirby Ray Qualls, or simply Kirby Ray, is the voice of Real Rock 99.3. He is a musician, he is a fan. So much of his life has been dedicated to the art of music.
Announcing bands at concerts.
Kirby was born on October 13th, 1971, and grew up in Perry County. And it was at a young age when he discovered his passion.
I started drums when I was about 5. My parents were nice enough to get me a drum set. Got a guitar when I was 9. Probably got my first group of people to jam with when I was around 13 or 14.
Kirby's first band was called Sinister, a metal rock band which was founded in 1985 and has been in several bands ever since. The Honey Offering, Gick, the Grimshaws, and Emaciation, who performed at Ozzy's show in Carbondale during the solar eclipse in 2017. Emaciation will be celebrating their 30th year anniversary this year in 2026. But let's go back to the 90s when he would begin his radio career.
My band, Gick, and some of the guys from the Honey Offering moved to San Francisco. And we decided we'd go out there and play some music, and Gick did a U.S. tour in 1995, and we would end some of those shows with Emaciation songs because we were about to start that band. So moving to California in the mid 90s, I started working at Berkeley University radio station. A girl that I knew went to the university, and she said, no one will work the overnight shift. So I'd work my full day at work in San Francisco, ride the BART under the bay, walk through Oakland at midnight, and go to the university and run a show all night long. And the guy that was on before me was a drummer of a punk band called Flipper. And it was just a great experience. So I've loved radio since the 70s and always wanted to be in it. My friend out there said, hey, this is maybe a chance for you to come in and train yourself on how to do this. So the 2 years I was in California, I worked at Berkeley University, came back to Missouri because it just was a little too expensive to live out there. Also, all of my friends were here and my family, so I wanted to come back to that, and I really love Perry County and Cape County. So
Once back home, he began showing up to live broadcasts and setting up equipment for Zimmer Radio Group, which included K103, KZIM, and of course, Real Rock 99.3, all before he had the job. 3 months into this, his future boss, David Zimmer, would ask this question.
David asked the crew, you know, how's Kirby working out for us? And Kevin Casey said, well, Kirby doesn't work for us. He's just showing up. So they said, hire him. So it was about August of 97 when I started here. And, you know, I've been on Real Rock the whole time, been on several of our other stations, Mike FM and K103. And, you know, it's just been a great time. And something I like to say about working in radio, I just always thought music was going to be something that, you know, I'd love to work in music. I'd love to help promote concerts and things like that. So I thought, you know, working in radio and being in bands all my life, it goes hand in hand. I know how to work this equipment. I love to talk to crowds, love to tell people, you know, what's going on. I get excited about things like bands announcing tours and new music.
Despite his unquestionable love for music and radio, one of the things that gives Kirby the most fulfillment is public service and philanthropy. In fact, the day I interviewed him, he explained that the station was doing the St. Jude Radiothon, which raised just over $165,000 for sick children.
With all the help of all the listeners and all the help of all of our stations, we do this every year. So the public service is something that, you know, helping people is something that I think is important. And luckily at my job, I get to do that. So I've been very fortunate. It's one of the most rewarding parts of the job.
So in conclusion, Kirby is born in 1971 here in Cape and would grow up in Perry County. He would join his first band, Sinister, at 14 years old. In 1994, he would move to San Francisco and work at his first radio station at Berkeley University. 3 years later, after a few months of showing up and setting up equipment, David Zimmer hires him, and that's when he begins his career at Real Rock 99.3. In 2017, during the solar eclipse, Kirby's band Emaciation performed at Ozzy's show in Carbondale. And in 2026, on the day of this interview, Kirby, K103, and 93.9 Mike FM would raise over $165,000 for St. Jude Children's Hospital. From the 80s, when he joined his first band, until today, where he continues to be the voice thousands of us recognize, this has been Kirby Ray, before and after. Cape Girardeau has a long history of great entertainers that come from this area and great entertainers that come to the area. Many artists from Chicago, St. Louis, and Memphis would pass through and often stop to perform. But even beyond that, entertainers from all over have played here in Cape. Many would put on shows at the Arena building, including Elvis, Johnny Cash, and Metallica.
Great artists played here in Cape Girardeau. I mean, we had Cliff Burton with Metallica here, you know, on the Master of Puppets tour at the Arena, and so many great rock bands played the Arena in the 80s. And at the SEMO District Fair, that's one of the oldest outdoor events in the state. They've had tons of bands, and I was telling you just a bit ago that Johnny Cash and his wife, June Carter Cash, performed there. Waylon Jennings and his wife performed at the SEMO District Fair. Willie Nelson performed at the fair. You know, we've had Styx and REO Speedwagon in more recent years. In the past, we've had, you know, John Denver in our town. Ike and Tina Turner played on Good Hope Street. Tina came back and played the Show Me Center in the 80s. Elvis Presley at the Arena. You can see the poster of that at Graceland when you go to visit there, of him playing here in Cape in the late 50s. So there's been so many great bands. And obviously the Show Me Center in the 80s, we had Kiss, Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, top bands playing here in Cape Girardeau all the time. So, you know, we still have great artists coming out of this area, and we still have great entertainment that comes with some of the festivals and some of the venues around town. But our town holds a great history with music. And we were talking about Peg Myers with Shivelbines. You've done the recent Shivelbines video. It was incredible. And there's a great link to music in our town through Shivelbines. And Peg Myers helped start that place. When he was a teenager, he would see Louis Armstrong come to town, who was performing on riverboats. He'd come into town, and as a teenager, Peg would watch this. And then later started Shivelbines and started his own band, and they would dress in crazy outfits. You'll have to see some pictures of Peg Myers from back in the day. So the music connection to Cape Girardeau has just been incredible. Even Chris Stapleton came to play here at a barn party years ago. So a lot of bands, you know, really care about this area, and there are still good bands coming out of Perry County, Cape County, counties around here that are, you know, true to maybe country music and hard rock music. Obviously, I like all kinds of music, but I'm really proud of a lot of the bands that have come out of this area and proud of the bands that have been here to play.
Kirby, can you tell me your favorite concert you've seen in Cape and your favorite concert you've seen just all together?
My first concert was John Denver at the Arena in St. Louis in 1975 with my mom, and I can still remember seeing John sitting on the stool there at the arena, and it just blew me away to see live music. I thought that's something that I really want to do. For here in Cape, you know, there have been many, many great shows. You know, something that's probably one of my favorites is seeing Guns N' Roses before Appetite for Destruction came out with Alice Cooper at the Show Me Center back in the day. And Alice was an honor to have here with Kane Roberts on guitar. You know, that's probably one of my favorites is Alice and Guns N' Roses. But as I say, you know, Motley Crue played here, Aerosmith, many great bands have played here. But probably one of my top ones is to see Alice Cooper with Guns N' Roses back in the 80s at the Show Me Center. It's one of my favorites. And obviously some of the shows that came to the arena. King Cobra played there. Wasp came to town but was banned because they were throwing raw meat into the crowd. So the opening band still played, but Wasp didn't. So, you know, there's been many great shows here. And to say that Cliff Burton was in town before he died with Metallica on the Master of Puppets tour is pretty incredible.
Can you tell me about the story of you and Lemmy?
So luckily, working in radio, I've been able to interview many of my heroes with all kinds of music, you know, and interviewed Rob Halford of Judas Priest and, you know, Tom Kiefer of Cinderella and Lemmy from Motorhead. And you know, I don't know if I mentioned Alice Cooper. I got to interview him on the phone and many other people. But interviewing Lemmy from Motorhead was one of my high points because we spent all afternoon together. We hung out and we did the interview. And he had so many great things to say. I said, you know, tell me about some of the things that got you into it into the beginning. Because he played for a long time before, you know, rest in peace now to Lemmy. But he's a little more old school than some people, you know, in heavy metal. So Lemmy, when I asked him about some of his influences, you know, he says Little Richard. Rob Halford from Judas Priest says Little Richard because, you know, he'd do that, you know, and he'd jump on the piano. You know, it was about as intense as you could get, and these guys loved it. So when Lemmy shared that with me, you know, it really gave me goosebumps. And after the interview was over, he said, let's just hang out. And we were with the singer of Hatebreed because they were opening the show. So we're all just hanging out, me and a friend of mine, singer of Hatebreed and Lemmy. And we're just listening to music. And an Aerosmith song came on, and also a Fleetwood Mac song came on, and Lemmy's chair's right next to mine, and we're both rocking out to it. And he's telling me, man, I've always loved this Aerosmith song. I've always loved this Fleetwood Mac song. And just to see his, you know, enthusiasm and excitement for music was something that I felt, you know, and I thought, wow, you know, me and him are so much alike on just really getting excited about music, and I really felt a kinship with him. And he was so kind to me, and that's part of what is so likable about Lemmy. You know, he's true, and he loves music, and he'll talk about it all day, you know, and that was one of my favorite interviews I ever got to do, especially, you know, to get to hang with him during the interview, not on the phone, in person, you know.
Explain what music has meant for you in your life and what music, how it benefits society.
So to me, music, you know, is so important. I love art of all kinds, and I support it. And, you know, part of the reason for that is my mom and dad were good at art, and I really enjoyed seeing what they could do. My mom was a special needs teacher. My dad worked on the railroad. My dad could draw really well. My mom could make really cool things for her classes at school. So that inspired me to get into art. You know, I also loved the art of Egypt. When I was a kid, I'd go to the library in Perryville and look at the art of Egypt, and it really inspired me. And I was already listening to music, but you know, music to me, there's so much injustice and evil, you know, that happens, and torture and violence to people on this planet. It's like you try to find ways to fight that. And really my favorite way that I've found to battle evil and people who have sadness and depression is to make music and play music and just be positive to them, offer respect to people. And music has been my way of finding joy in my life and also giving that to other people that I've been able to play music with and listen to. So that's my way of battling, you know, injustice or evil, you know, or just violence toward people. Because it's a war that may never end on this planet. You know, as long as there are people who are going to be able to make money from evil things, you know, that's going to keep happening. But people may be able to learn by example from people who put out artwork, real artwork, you know, real paintings, real books, real music, go on stage and deliver that. And people are able to leave their problems at the door when that happens. They come in and they have a good time. They feel like they're a sisterhood and brotherhood there. And it's something that brings people together. So that's why it's so important to me.
Heavy metal fans, a lot of times, are the most peaceful people.
Yes.
They get that
aggression out.
Going to concerts and listening to music. I always thought that was an interesting concept. I never thought about that.
Yes, you know, a lot of people thought bands like Cannibal Corpse are violent or Creator, you know, because their lyrics seem violent. And they say this is like a comic book or a movie. You know, they're very highly intelligent people, and they're able to convey that when people try to put them in a corner and say, you're speaking violence. It's like, no, it's a reflection of what's happening on this world, you know. And, you know, people who are able to get their aggression out at a concert by, you know, head banging or moving their body. Those people are a lot of times some of my most peaceful friends, the ones in the leather jackets, you know, and the hard metal logos on their jackets, you know, and going to these shows because they're able to find a way to let that steam off. And you know how it is, you know, sometimes people want to make a knee-jerk reaction and just say, burn it all down. But this gives you the time to get that energy out and think, okay, you know, not everything's perfect, but we can make this work, you know. And heavy metal is something that's always got me there. And heavy metal was the #1 thing on MTV when I was a kid. And, you know, I was lucky to have that time to see, in my lifetime, music really evolve for maybe hundreds or thousands of years before that, where music was pretty much the same. But, you know, I've seen it change in my life, and I think that heavy metal, a lot of times, you know, when you hear of Alice Cooper or Lemmy, you know, these guys look like outlaws, but they're kind people. They really are, and it's a inspiration to me, you know, to see that. So that's probably, you know, what I could say about that.
Kirby, is there anything else you'd like to say that I didn't touch up on?
Just thanks for all the support for the radio station and for all of the public service, you know, that we're able to do, like the St. Jude Hospital events and the Toys for Tots and Coats for Kids and Nature Center events. You know, thanks for supporting those things with the radio station when we put the word out about it. We try to make sure and invite people to Happy Slapowitz and all of these events that happen around town, the Cape Riverfront Market, things that are really helpful to our town. And, you know, thanks for listening to Real Rock to be able to learn about those things. And also all the concerts that happen that are charity events in this town. Thanks for listening to those and coming to support those. For the Arts Council and different events, you know, that happen to support the city of Cape with the Fall Festival and all the great events that we have in our town with this beautiful nature that we have here with the river. It's a great place to live in Cape, and I'm glad to be on radio here promoting what's happening in our town.
Awesome.
Thanks, brother.
That's awesome video.
We're getting the light. You might be able to get a still out of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Killer, brother.
Awesome. anyways, that's it for now. For more, follow me on YouTube, Life in Cape Girardeau, or follow me here on TikTok, where you can find me bringing history to life and discovering all types of cool, interesting, even quirky things about Cape Girardeau.